And I'll do the recording.
Thank you. And you'll throw it on YouTube later?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll have to figure that part out, but absolutely. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to Rainbow Table Talk with myself, Ma Dukes, and my co-host, Elizabeth Strauss. Tonight, we're going to talk about what can probably be a pretty sensitive issue within the community. We're going to talk about discrimination and bullying and queerbaiting and this division within our community. First, let me tell you a little bit about our show. We are Rainbow Table Talk, and it is a roundtable discussion of mental health and societal issues that affect the LGBTQIA community today. We try to tackle different subjects each show because there's no way we could cover everything in just one little show. So today we're going to talk about these things. You are free to say pretty much whatever you want, as long as you are not disrespectful or throwing around any hate speech or anything like that towards anyone on the panel or would happen to join us on the live audience. I'd like to introduce Starchild is joining us tonight. They are a poet and minister and all-around rock star, friend of mine out of Virginia area. Thank you for joining us, Starchild. We have Robert Fleming joining us from Delaware tonight, and the awesome Jamie McCormick. What's up, Jamie? Hey, I see you there, bud. So, let's just go ahead and jump in real quick. Who here has experienced bullying or discrimination of any sort or queerbaiting from someone within our community? I see Elizabeth raising her hand right away. So you wanted to break the ice and tell us about what happened to you?
Yeah, I'll break that ice. I've been bullied more in my late 20s, and now I'm in my early 30s. I identify as a lesbian or a dyke or queer woman, cis female, and I've really been bullied mostly in our poetry community by queer people, but also in the LGBTQ community, a lot by pansexual identifying people. Sometimes I think it's because I'm not really sure, to be honest. I did identify as bisexual in my 20s for a while, and then grew to realize I just want to be with women. At least for now, that's what I identify as. You know, people change and evolve. I don't know what's going to happen down the line. But it almost felt like they were saying I had to be this. And I respect pansexuality. I respect all sexuality and gender, but it didn't ever make me feel good that I was questioned for my sexuality or my gender for that being. I've also, some non-binary people have bullied me within the community, and it doesn't, I am confident in my she, her pronouns. I'm confident in that I'm cis female and in my sexuality, and I don't tell other people what they should be. I've of course inquired questions if I'm unsure of something, but I try to be as respectful as I can. When asking those questions, I'm a human. I may err, and if I do, I of course apologize. But yeah, that's been my experience, at least living in New York as a queer woman. I think you're muted.
Anybody else experienced any kind of similar bullying or intimidation in the community? Elizabeth, when you say bullying, like, is it more like, oh, well, you don't know what you are, you're bisexual, then you're lesbian, and kind of
condescending,
giving you grief because you've changed and evolved and
I think that, like, perhaps, and I'm just guessing. Perhaps me confidently evolving in a family that values me equally, and in certain communities that I feel valued and safe equally, could be seen as maybe not fair to them or intimidating. I've had and I understand we all come from different parts of life. I understand not everyone has grown up in safe places where they can feel who they are, and that's awful. And I want people to grow up and feel safe in their gender and sexuality and whoever and who they are. But it certainly comes off condescending. There's one thing I do remember when I think I was about 25. I was working a Broadway event, and I was standing with someone or working with someone who I believe they identify as pan/demisexual. And a woman walked by, and I made a comment of I thought she was cute, not to the woman, just to who I was standing with, very harmless. And they said, "Are you?" They said, "What's your sexuality?" And I think I was identifying as sexually fluid or slash bisexual at the time, and they said that made no sense, and it made no sense that I was physically attracted to someone. And that hurt my feelings because I don't judge people whether they're attracted to someone through emotion or physicality or both or whatever. That's their business. But I just didn't feel it was right to be judged like that. That I thought someone was cute, in which I don't know the person at all. I just physically was attracted to this person, and it didn't make me feel good. It made me feel devalued, is the word I will use.
Robert, I see you raised your hand.
Yes, right now we're just sharing on bullying or discrimination from another GLBT person. Is that correct?
Community,
Yes.
yes. Yeah.
Okay. So I left my wife in 1996. I was living in Virginia, and I was seeking a separate residence. I went to look at an apartment in the District of Columbia, and the landlord arrived. I had seen him at uh, gay events, but I didn't know him. I wouldn't even say he was an acquaintance of mine. And I I was kind of persnickety in doing the inspection. I brought a um, a little night light, and I pushed it into each electric outlet to make sure that it worked. So he saw I was persnickety about the unit. And after I did the inspection, um, I contacted him and I asked him for um, an application, and he agreed to leave it at the the main entrance desk where there was a reception person. And he did not leave it when he said he would. And I contacted him again, and he was non-responsive. Um, what I did is I went to the DC housing office, and I got a copy of the tenant landlord laws, and left a copy for him at the front of the building, and demanded that he give me an application for the housing. And what I realized about my choices for responding to discrimination was I could go through the person, which is, really push them to give me the application. If they didn't, I would file a complaint with the DC housing laws, or I could go around them, that I could just look for another place where I didn't experience housing discrimination. And in that case, I chose to go around uh, the gay person who was discriminating against me because I was gay. And um, and that was the time that I was discriminated against for housing by another gay person. That's it.
I mean, I'll just say firstly, as I'm a professional licensed realtor, I'm really sorry that happened to you. Um, any discrimination, anywhere in the United States of the world, it's a violation of your license. Especially, I've seen landlords do it. I've seen other brokers do it, and I hate it. Um, I of course make sure I represent everyone. I make sure to I take that very seriously. I never want anyone to feel they're less than or that they are not worth being represented. So I'm very sorry that happened to you.
Yes,
Well, I
that's
did
never
find
should
another
happen.
residence, and I was
Good,
able to find housing. So
good. And that's the most important thing, that you found safe housing.
Morgan, have you ever?
Yeah, no, I was gonna say like my primary experience of discrimination and bullying has to do with my autism, which I didn't really recognize as being a thing for a long time. I just thought that I was constantly like getting in trouble, with people, and and it's a really tricky thing because I live in an intersectional identity where on the one hand, I have enjoyed the privilege of being, middle class, middle upper class, like white man, my whole life. But it's like I've always had this kind of secret that I'm not completely a man, and that I like people of all gender expressions. Um, you know, and so, um, and so for a long time, I just thought so it's sort of weird because I've experienced the it's kind of hard figuring out like what's in your head versus what is actually stuff that where other people could make changes to make the world, to make the community safer for someone who's neurodivergent. I think that there are like I one of the things that I really appreciate is when and I find this I think this should be kind of part of being queer is to understand that all norms are subject for continual negotiation, and subject for um, you know exploration and direct communication about, and that like if you want to set a boundary, awesome, let's be consensual, but set the boundary, like say what you need, you know and so like if you need um, if I'm taking up too much space, talking too long, whatever, just express that, like say that makes me feel uncomfortable. Okay. Yeah. Like instead of like, that makes me feel uncomfortable because you're an arrogant asshole, you know, because I'm an autistic who has found like a favorite topic and I'm, monologuing and I lose track of time and I just start rambling or something, and yeah, so it's complicated, because there's like shit that I've got to like examine about myself, because I definitely have all the entitlement of a rich white man, because that's what I was socialized to be. And at the same time, like there's this, secret part of me that I've only started to open up about. And it's just like I get into communities sometimes where like I've been kicked out of online queer communities because and when nothing was communicated overtly, like as to like you're violating a boundary, it was like no, just boom, like all of a sudden things escalate, and then I get kind of like manicky, my autism or whatever, and it's like when with autistics, like if you try to shame us into submission, that doesn't work. Like we don't take a subtle hint, that's like, hey, like if somebody starts cringing, like that isn't like, I'm not just going to be like, oh, okay, right, yeah. I mean, I used to be that way for a long time, you know, but now that I'm just kind of fully out, I'm just kind of like, if you need something, just say so. And I would love to honor your needs, you know.
I agree. Very well said. A
Beautifully
lot of
said.
things. So, Jamie, do you have anything that you'd like to share? I mean, you don't have to. You're just welcome to sit and listen.
Uh, I live in quite a small community, and so I don't have a lot of as much in-person social interaction with other queer people. It tends to be more online interaction rather than in person. When I'm interacting with queer people in person, it tends to be because I'm doing a performance, and so it's an even safer safe space, if you know what I mean, than most queer spaces normally would be. Everybody's on the same page, kind of idea. So I'm I'm not sure that I've experienced this type of thing. The one person that I can think of that I've had a problem with in the queer community, who kind of got to me, it wasn't quite this type of thing. It was more because they I don't quite know how to describe it, but I've only had a couple of wee instances of one that really got to me was that I was in the one queer space in Aberdeen, which is like the closest city to where I live. And it takes me quite a while on the bus to get there. It's quite a big deal, and there's one queer bar in Aberdeen, and I was in the men's toilet. I'd used the loo. I'd come out. I'd washed my hands, and I was combing my beard and moustache. And on the way out the door, there were two older, cishet gay gentlemen standing talking in the toilets. And as I went out the door, I've got to explain that the local word for a female is quine. It comes from queen. And so as I'm going out the door, I say, aye, quine. And it was the fact that they waited until I was going out the door. It was they didn't confront me about being in the male toilets. They didn't say anything to me face to face. They waited till I was going out the door and said, aye, quine. And it was just it's the one queer bar in sort of like a 50-mile radius of where I live, a 100-mile radius possibly. And it just got to me because it's like, this should be my community, this should be my safe space. I shouldn't need to worry about that kind of shit here. Other than that, most of the bullying I've had has actually been from the straight community rather than within the queer community itself.
Yeah, I'm sure we've all dealt with discrimination and bullying from the straight community. Hello, Chanson. Welcome. Hi, Gwen. Nice to see you again.
It's interesting for me. I've actually, to my face, been discriminated more from the LGBTQ community more than the heterosexual community, in my experience. Which is
as a very butch lesbian, I get a lot of discrimination, bullying, rude comments, things like that from the hetero community. But I was very, very surprised in the first few years after I came out, how much I got from other butch women within the community, like almost like there was a competition. So, in my area, so they had to push away the competition almost. So there was a lot of, just uncomfortable talk, a lot of there's a few different gay bars in my hometown, some that are welcoming of all people of the community. There's one that's just like for your older uh male gays, there's some that's for there was just like a lesbian bar. There's a few different venues. um and I felt more comfortable in the guys bar or the bar that everybody could go to than I did in the lesbian bar a lot of times. um because there was just a lot of, that underhanded gossip and talking behind your hands about people kind of scene.
Yeah, I've never really personally felt comfortable in a lesbian bar because um I'm either grabbed physically without consent, which is never okay. Just because you walk into a bar where you might be there to want to meet someone for a romantic or sexual reason doesn't mean you should touch or grab someone without their consent ever. Um, but also because like I've been even told recently, like I don't look queer enough. I'm not a real queer person. I don't have enough queer identifying people in my life where, sometimes people only see a certain part of how you live your life. I know who is in my life and who I want in my life and how I choose to live my life, and I don't need to prove anything to anyone. I know who I am. I know how I identify. Robert has his hand up.
I'm going to expand to talk about support versus discrimination, not just in the GLBT community. And I'm going to share my experience as a writer. I I consider myself a crossover writer. As early as 2010, I was publishing same-sex themes in straight or just regular literary magazines. And my experience has been um, mixed. There's there's several publishers who have been very welcoming. I started publishing with a publisher called Local Gems Press as early as 2010, and they published um, writing about same-sex relationships. And um, 2 years ago, I submitted to a magazine called Kaleidoscope. They had a call for a mother-daughter relationship, and I submitted a piece about my relationship with my drag mother, and they had two pieces. One was um, a very short submission, which is 2 to 3 sentences, and another one which was longer. And uh, they didn't respond to my submission, and I saw on their website that they published about 40 people who talked about um, straight mother-daughter relationships, and they didn't publish my 2 to 3 sentences about my drag mother. And I was angry. I was thinking about making a complaint, and I'm familiar with the gay organization called GLAD, which helps GLBT people have fair treatment in the media. And I also attend a Wednesday writers group, and they encouraged me to focus on the people who support me as a writer and just forget about everybody else. And um, I ended up processing my anger. And again, I chose to go around this and not fight the magazine that drag mother, drag daughter relationship is just as valid as a birth mother and birth daughter. And but I was very surprised to have that rejection, and I had never experienced discrimination like that, having a drag mother and being a drag daughter. So that's it.
Thank you for sharing that experience with us. Chanson, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well, honey. Have you ever like dealt with any kind of discrimination like that within the community?
Well, I'm straight, but
Okay.
even though
Does it
I
mean that
think,
you can't be discriminated against by a gay person because you're straight? That's a thing too. Seriously.
well, when I was in college, I had several friends that that are gay and lesbian, and by my close association with them, they assumed that I was gay. Um, and so there was this Facebook page in college called Beyonce Knows. And so it was a group of people, we never knew who they were exactly, but they would go around and posting gossip about people. And one day it was something about me and one of my friends, and we're like, we've never even tried anything, we never even considered that. Um, but like that's the closest I've come to that. In like in church, a few times I went with him because he's a minister as well, and they asked him if I was gay. He said no, he's straight, like just leave him alone. um, so like that was interesting to me. That just because I hang around with a gay person, or because I'm a close friend with somebody that has a certain way, they have a different lifestyle than mine, that I would be, um, I guess, tied to them in that way. So
Yeah.
that was interesting.
Lumped in just be based on association.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've met at least in my generation and the generation under me, I sadly see a lot of queer people discriminate against heterosexual people, which I'm not okay with. I mean, people shouldn't discriminate against anyone, but when people do that, it's its own form of bigotry, and people shouldn't be questioning people's identities, um, you know, who they choose to hang out with, and it's important to have different groups of people in your life that are diverse and come from different backgrounds. I have a lot of heterosexual people in my life, and I get a lot of shit about it from queer people. And I don't appreciate that. I choose to hang out with who I choose to hang out with, not based on, you know, who they want to be attracted to. I choose to hang out with them because of their personalities, and if, they're good people.
Yeah, I choose my friends based on what they can bring to my table. I don't
Yeah.
care if you sleep with women, you sleep with men, you don't sleep with anybody.
Yeah.
If you're a friend and you're open and you're honest, and you come with an open heart, like, yeah, let's have a friendship. Let's have, um I judge people on the quality of their character, not the labels on their clothes, I guess, or
Yeah.
the
I mean,
labels they put on themselves.
the only people I discriminate against are assholes.
Well, yeah,
Yeah, those people I discriminate against if you're an asshole. But otherwise, I don't discriminate against anyone.
Yeah, play the I-95 asshole song for them, and you'll just make them go away.
Exactly.
How about you, Gwen? I know you've been out for quite a many years. Have you ever have been discriminated against by someone else within the community?
Not really in the gay community. I know that the one time that I can think of, first of all, people don't even know I'm gay unless I tell them because I'm look like such a woman. Okay. Which I am, but that's not the thing. So I didn't have that to worry with. I came out in 1990, and that was right when AIDS came out, you know, real heavy and everything. And I was living in Florida, and I was working at this ice cream shop, and my boss didn't know I was gay, and he loved what I was doing, loved my work, you know, loved everything. And then one day the girl I was seeing, she came in, you know, and she definitely is butch. And so she stayed there for a little while or whatever. Well, the next day he told me he didn't have anything else for me. He said, "And let's just leave it at that." Okay. Well, I knew what happened, you know, but I do see a lot of discrimination. And I grew up being bullied in school because I was poor and got a reputation just for that. So I had to overcome all that before, you know, I could even, I knew that I knew that I liked women when I was in the 8th grade, you know, or liked girls, whatever. And, but as far as me personally being discriminated against, I think the worst thing is, you know, the job. And, you know, that's still a factor today for a lot of people, even though they're supposed to have, you know, that safety net in place or whatever. But, and like you said, Elizabeth, I see a lot of discrimination against everybody. You know, the blacks, the Mexicans, the whether they're straight or gay, whatever it is, and it's out there, and it's directed towards anybody that's different than you are. Doesn't matter, regardless of their sexual preference or their lifestyle. It's just anybody that's different than you are. And so what I've learned to do is live my truth. And if I come up upon it, I'll say something, you know, or if somebody says something to me in that respect, I'll say, I don't go for that kind of stuff because I don't. I love everybody for who they are, not like you said, like not for their labels. And but you know, I've been told that I wear rose-colored glasses and I live in my own world. Well, yeah, I do because I'm comfortable here and they all love me. So I make my world. I surround myself with people that are like-minded and like-hearted and like soulful, you know, because I don't go for all that other crap. And the other part of that for me is that I don't have the energy to waste on that shit. Period. So anyway, that's what mine is. I try not to take it personal, even though it could be personal, and I look for the lesson in it or the blessing in it and go from there.
I appreciate you sharing, and I kind of, you know, agree with a lot of what you said. We definitely have to live our truths. So I'm going to ask a really hard question for everybody. Has there ever been a moment that you can think of where you consciously or unconsciously discriminated or thought, you know, a negative thought about somebody else based on what they look like or what they were acting like at the moment, you know, and then thought to yourself, well, damn, that's just as bad as when somebody does it to me, you know? because I believe that no matter how enlightened we are, we always have room for more improvement, more love in our hearts, more, and we're human. We make mistakes. I've done it. I've looked at somebody and said, damn, you must be from the fucking ghetto because the way you acted, all ratchet and shit. Things like that, unconscious bias. And it's something we have classes about it with my job, but it's really made me think about like how I've thought about, the guy that's driving in front of me and he's driving too slow, and I'm being an asshole, like, yo, get the hell out of my way. What are you doing? And not knowing that he's lost and he's trying to find his way to his daughter's house and his GPS went out, So it's like an unconscious bias of you just think people are assholes, or, maybe they come from the ghetto, or they're a hillbilly because they talk with an accent, things like that. Has anybody unconsciously done that?
I'm sure we all have. And
Yes.
I mean, I'm sure I have. I can't pinpoint like a specific moment, but I hope that as I get older, I'm doing less of it, of course, and I'm thinking before I speak. And I think something I learned, especially, I mean, listen, the Trump administration was the worst 4 years ever, and the kind of repercussion of it is still happening. But I think what I've learned in the last 4 years, because we've been very divided, and seeing kind of how who people voted for and how people care about activism and politics, given what happened, is judging people for that stuff and thinking like, like, oh, you're from here and you voted this way, instead of thinking before we speak and trying to have the conversations, the uncomfortable conversations, and being like, all right, they said this and I said that. Is it possible to have an adult conversation and understand each other? We may not agree 100%. We may not choose to stay friends or whatever the relationship is with the person, but can we try to have an adult conversation and see the differences and potentially learn from each other? That's at least in my 30s what I'm trying to do. In my 20s, I think I just had this fire in me, was like, everyone that voted this way and everyone that thinks this way is an asshole, and that's wrong. And it was also just this time of fear was thrown in our face and the world was upside down because we didn't get at least I didn't get the outcome. I can't speak for everyone, but I didn't get the outcome I wanted. I wanted Hillary to win, and we didn't get that. And it was very somber and still is. But as we evolve and as the world changes, especially with the pandemic, how we've all been quarantined and have kind of gotten more of a glimpse into each other's lives because we've been stuck, so per se, I hope that I learn more and stop judging as much. That's, we're human, we're still going to err, it's not an excuse, but it's I'm trying the best I can to have, if I have to, those uncomfortable conversations with people, those adult conversations, to try to kind of reach a middle ground.
I get you. I totally agree with what Christy put in the chat. So much of our biases are taught as children.
Yeah.
And not even necessarily consciously taught. I don't think our parents set out in their brains to say, oh, I'm going to teach my child to be a racist or to be a bigot or to discriminate, but they learn from our actions. They see us as parents, and you could tell a child 10 times not to touch the stove, it's hot, and they're going to touch it until they know, because they see you touching it, but they don't realize that you're not touching the stove itself. And that maybe that's a bad analogy, but you guys kind of, they learn from us. They see what we do. So when we're standing in the grocery lines and, oh, look at him, he's dressed like, they're going to pick up those behaviors and those biases and those things from us. because it's what we've learned from our parents. And it's only when we, like Elizabeth said, make a conscious decision to change our own narratives, change our discussions, that we're going to be able to change those lessons that get taught to children.
Yeah, and I like what Christy posted here, what we see on TV, and more specifically these days, what we see on social media, because there's a lot of virtue signaling, a lot of toxic, and then your algorithm, if you're constantly reading one thing, your algorithm syncs up to where you only see one thing and you don't get a diversity of what to see, which is why I actually have been trying to go less and less off social media these days, just for myself. People can do what they want, but just for myself, looking at social media less and less. But yeah, TV and media and social media is certainly a big part of that, for sure.
Star Child, as a minister, as a pastor, do you see religious biases come into play, like within the community, within the community around you? I know you're there in semi-rural Virginia.
Sure, yeah. Well, and yeah, I've just been on this really interesting kind of mystical journey lately, just about, kind of questioning some of just the authoritarianism that is kind of baked into Western culture. Um, and, I feel like I see this like not just in right-wing people, but I mean, honestly, like I get really intimidated by some of the woke kind of people that are like super woke, and I'm just like, wow, I'm not going to measure up, and I don't feel like, having like just super stringent, standards for that kind of stuff. Like I feel like we need to be creating communities of grace where we're not like nervous about offending people. We're just committed to open, direct communication about like, hey, I I feel uncomfortable with that. When you say the word dyke, you're a cisgender man, and I don't think that's a word you should say. Is it, can you not say that? Or whatever. Like,
Oh, you don't. Oh, you're saying that other people shouldn't be allowed to say that word?
maybe, I don't know. Like, depending on the community, depending on what
I
people are
mean,
feeling in the community.
I
Like,
will. I mean, I'll personally say I don't mind if someone uses the word dyke as long as it's for positive reason. If you're going to use it as negatively, obviously that's for a hate reason. But I don't mind if other people use that word. It doesn't offend me if non-dykes use that word as long as it's positively.
yeah, and
That's
see
just
that.
my opinion of that language.
What's really interesting about that is like, I feel like there's so many different norms that can happen in queer space, around what vocabulary is used, and like who's part of, like how non-binary are you to be, do you have to be femme? Like if there's like,
It's a spectrum. Non-binary and gender is a spectrum.
right, yeah, but like there's different, there's not, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is like the quest for the like one universal like understanding of like wokeness, or like, how to talk respectfully, like it's ridiculous. Like it always has to happen in contextual conversation, like just connecting with other people directly and learning what makes sense to us like as a group, and then just kind of following that and learning as we go, as opposed to like trying to find the one, way to understand it or something.
Yeah. There was like some feedback. What I was gonna say is I personally don't like when people use the word woke for activism. I think respectful or value holds more meaning, because when I see people say that, I'm like, I tend to see them do the opposite. And I don't see them learn from it. And people are gonna use the language they're gonna learn. We're not gonna be able to change that vocabulary sometimes. But I don't know a lot of people that when they are like, I'm so woke, I'm like, well, your eyes aren't as open as you're saying. That's just my opinion of that, though.
Right. And then you can be, people that are quote unquote woke. Well, you're not woke enough. You're not up with it enough. I also think location has a lot to do with what your community is like in your area. I mean, obviously somebody that's in, let's say rural Kentucky is not going to have as large of a community available to them as somebody in, say, New York City or Los Angeles or, a Denver or a New York. And I think that also affects people's level of, how do I want to put this? You can be gay in rural Kentucky, and as long as you mind your own business and you don't, people don't say too much shit to you. You know what I mean? Like, you're there, you're I mean, you don't brag about it. You're not, open and out, but you don't get too much shit from, the people around you in general. But if you're in a big city, you could get 10 times as much discrimination from people around you because you don't fit into where they think you should be. You're not as quote unquote woke. Maybe you're not as feminine as you should be, or as butch as they think you should be, because there's so many more people to have opinions about who and what you should be. Does that make sense? Like what I'm trying to say, you know?
Yeah, it makes sense. But also, as you know, in the street community, people get discriminated based on how feminine or masculine somebody think they should be. Um, as I know, as a man, people think I shouldn't be emotional, or I shouldn't show my feelings, or I shouldn't cry, things like that. Um, so there's definitely discrimination all across the board. But I just think that if we're more informed and less, for lack of a better word, ignorant, I think that things would be a lot better for everybody. As long as we have a common understanding about, these are basic human traits and not based on um, social location or sexual preference. Um, like, I grew up here in Baltimore, and um, it's like, oh wait, this is what I meant to say. In 2006, I went to a I went on a college trip to Harpers Ferry, West Virginia, and they act like they had never seen black people before. Like they look like stepped out of a cartoon somewhere. Like they look speechless. And I thought that was hilarious because I'm like, this is 2000. Like at that time it was 2006. I said, I'm sure these people have seen black people by now. Um, but they look so surprised. I thought that was hilarious. But yeah, I just wanted to share that.
Robert, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah. I I remember one time when I felt that I discriminated against myself. It's about 2010. I thought that I was fully out and comfortable with being gay in every aspect of my life, but I discovered one area where I was not comfortable. I went on a cruise with my partner, and one of the areas on the ship is a dance hall. And at the dance, probably 95% of the people were straight, 5% were gay, and my partner wanted to dance with me, and I felt anxious and uncomfortable. I didn't want all the straight people to see me dancing with my partner and maybe touching him. And I was just so surprised that there's this one area where I was uncomfortable with, where when I'd been so out that I'd even been on television supporting gay rights and being totally comfortable with that. So I just wanted to share that surprise for myself, that even though I felt that I was so self-accepting, that I found an area where I still was struggling with. Thanks for
Robert,
listening.
do you think maybe that could have been because you were on a ship and on an enclosed space, and maybe you felt a little unintentionally scared that, you know, if someone had a bad reaction to you being gay, you had no means of escape?
No, I think the same thing would have been true on land if I went to uh, a dance hall with my partner. You know, I'd been on many cruises, was very comfortable with being on ships, and there was good security on the ship. That wasn't a concern for me.
Okay, well, thank you very much for sharing that experience with us. Hi, Christy, good to see your face. Thanks for joining. How are you?
You know, I'm okay.
Living the
I've been having
dream?
a little bit of a rough day, so I'm like, what's going on tonight? I need a little, a little connection. So I'm glad you guys
Well,
are here
we're
and
just
such,
having a discussion.
yeah, it's
I'm
such
glad you
important
joined.
work.
Thank you.
How are you?
I'm doing pretty well, thanks. Visiting down here in North Carolina, so different locale for this week.
Okay. Okay. We're at North Carolina.
I'm in Salisbury right now at a friend's house,
Okay, cool.
hanging out with the Guerrilla Poets this week.
Nice.
Yeah. Looking forward to probably going to be moving down here in May, so that'll be cool.
Nice. Yeah, I have some family down there, so it's nice down there.
I'm looking forward to it. It's like 16 degrees back home where I'm from right now, so big difference.
Where are you from?
I'm from Pennsylvania. I'm
Okay.
living in a little town right outside of Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania right now called Nanticoke.
Okay.
And so it's in the mountains, about 45 minutes from the Poconos. Everybody's heard of the Poconos, so you know that gives you an idea. Pocono racetrack, etc., etc.
Yep.
What you pouring there, Jamie? I see you pouring a drink in the background there.
It is unsweetened cranberry juice.
Oh, okay. No vodka
Whoop,
for
whoop.
in there? No vodka for in there?
No, I'm not much of a drinker.
Well, me either.
I like to joke that I gave up drinking many years ago due to popular opinion. So
I don't drink either. My cranberry juice is my go-to bar drink.
oh, I
There you
absolutely
go.
love cranberry juice. I'll put the carton in the freezer till it turns almost like a slushy.
Oh, I've never done that. I should try that
The
sometime.
simple pleasures in life.
No, that sounds delicious. I will try that next time I buy some cranberry juice. I think I'm out right now.
You know, and unfortunately, I think every single one of us, unless you can pass, like Gwen said, you know, she's a feminine woman, so unless people know, you wouldn't really assume about her that, you know, seeing her on the street that she's a lesbian woman. But obviously, you see me walking down the street in my Nikes and my jeans and my backwards ball cap. It's going to give you a second pause. Again, depending on location, because you can be like in the mountains, you know, of certain locales, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Virginia, where women kind of dress masculine, period. You know, when they're out working chores in their yard, they're not in the leggings and the little Skechers sneakers. They're in work boots and jeans, like they're you know, like their mate, and their mate is a man. But to look at them, I knew this woman years ago. She worked road construction with my husband. She was one of the most masculine women you've ever wanted to meet. She made me look like a girly girl. Okay. And, but she was one of the straightest women, you know, she had a husband and children, was very devoted, you know, to her relationship and her marriage. But strangers to look at her in a bar swore she was a butch lesbian, you know. So I hate that it is like that, but I think locale has a lot to do with your level of acceptance of yourself and your level of acceptance of other people.
Can I share
So-
something?
Well, it's 1 second. Robert had his hand up, and then I'll come back to you, Robert. And then Morgan, I see you over there giving me the peace sign.
I wanted to share on one way that GLBT people have fought discrimination, and that's by supporting the word equality and by having civil rights actions across United States. In 1999, the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force had a national event in the United States called Equality Begins at Home, where they gave $5,000 to each state to do civil rights actions in their state during the same weekend, which was the same week, March 21st through 22nd, 27th, 1999. And I was one of the leads for the District of Columbia. And I just wanted to share what my greatest accomplishments for my role on that. The first one, I was the lead for the money, and I was able to keep the actual budget within the $5,000. So we didn't spend any more than that. I was also the lead for communication, and we had the most media coverage and television news of any event for GLBT in DC, probably about for 5 years, and for also the gay bookstore called Lambda Rising. I was able to get them to do their front store window dedicated to GLBT equality for all books which related to that. My last one was that I was able to be the outreach for the bisexual and transgender community, and I was able to bring to the forum two speakers who were bisexual and two speakers who were transsexual for the forum in DC. And I'm very proud of participating in that, and that it set the foundation for moving forward for GLBT people to get marriage.
Well, as part of the community, I appreciate all of your efforts on my behalf. Just want to say that. You know, I like the word equality, but I like the word equity. I would rather have equity than equality, and it sounds like a minute distinction, but for me it is, in my opinion. And again, my opinion, as humble as it is, equity is more inclusive than equality. But again, just my opinion.
I agree with you very strongly on that, Bella.
Oh, really?
I
Gwen, I
very
know
much,
you had
yeah.
wanted to, thank you. I know you had wanted to say something after Robert.
I just want to share a funny story. I moved out here the first time to Nebraska in 1997. That was 25 years ago. And back then, everything was not as out. Okay. And I grew up in southern Georgia, so I was pretty naive. So my girlfriend and I went to the fair, and we came in through the agricultural entrance. Okay. Well, I started looking around and I started edging closer and closer, and I'm like, come on, come on. And she's like, what's the matter? What's the matter? So I'm like, I'll tell you in a minute. So we kept walking, and I was just staying as close as I could, and I was terrified. And so we get up a little further. She's like, what is wrong? I said, man, y'all grow y'all's women big out here. Because the women, like you were saying, in some places, they dress like men because that's part of their culture, their job, their lifestyle. And I just, being the little femme and naive femme that I was, it blew me away. So, yeah, I just wanted to share that.
Y'all they grow their women like they're corn out there in Nebraska tall. But
yeah, every one of them had the short haircut, the jeans, the wallets in their pockets, everything. And so, my gaydar is going all berserk and everything, and ain't none of them gay. So,
Well, that kind of leads us into something else we were going to talk about tonight, which is the term queerbaiting. Where I don't know if anyone else here has been, I'll use the word victim of that. I have. So before I go, would anyone like to comment on the term queerbaiting, or if they've had an experience where they have felt queerbaited either by someone outside the community or someone within the community?
why don't you explain what queer baiting is?
Yes. So I actually learned from my therapist this year what queerbaiting is. I had never heard that term until 2022, which queerbaiting is when someone kind of pulls you around, they bait you, and they kind of dangle you around for your identity. I was personally a victim of that this year for the first time in my life by someone that identifies as heterosexual. What my therapist explained to me was sometimes, at least she was speaking from one perspective, but that heterosexual identifying women sometimes do that to lesbian or queer identifying women because there's a comfort in the gender, sharing the same gender, but they aren't necessarily either. They're still maybe, they might not be comfortable in their sexuality or gender perhaps, and when they see someone who is, they will kind of dangle you around and lead you on and make you fall for them romantically or sexually or both, to the point where it really hurts when I put myself out there and I asked someone out and then they said who they were, and it was very shocking to me because all the signs were there for that. I thought this person was interested in me, and it really left a scar on me for a minute. I've moved on from that but it left this very big scar and impression on me of how someone could hurt someone like that and use someone for who they are, who's confident in their sexuality and their gender, because they're not. And it's very harmful to do that to a person. And it was very eye-opening to me when I learned what this term was. And I learned this term from someone that is heterosexual. My therapist is a heterosexual woman, but I didn't think about it how I was being queer baited until I explained the situation to her, and she said that I think that's what you went through, and I'm really sorry.
Well, I'm sorry that you went through that as well. That's kind of a sucky situation.
Thank you.
Um, I've had a similar situation where years ago where I thought somebody was interested in me, pretty much portrayed themselves to be bisexual. But then when I turned around and made moves, and really started to pursue a relationship with this person, then it was like, oh no, 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 I'm not that way. I just, I mess around with women for fun, but I don't want as a mate. I want a man.
And that's one of the most harmful things someone can say to someone. I mess around, or I was experimenting. It's very harmful when someone says that, because it's not consensual when that happens.
That's a big word there, consent.
Yeah, because when people say I'm experimenting or I'm messing around, that is not consensual between two people, physically or emotionally at all.
Yeah,
I'm
not your science grade.
Yeah.
I'm not here for you to get a science grade because you're experimenting with your sexuality. You're trying to figure out who or what you are.
Yeah.
So yeah, that can be a very sucky situation. I'm sorry you went through that.
Thank you. And I'm sorry to anyone that has ever been in that situation, and to anyone that's watching that might have not realized they could have done this to a person. Please try to have that tough conversation with yourself and understand how non-consensual and how harmful it is to people. Because we're all just trying to get through this world one day at a time, 1 minute at a time. And kind of, baiting someone and then sinking them really is mentally draining, which can then turn to a physically draining situation. Yeah.
I don't think I've ever been baited, but a related, more basic question for me is when I meet a new person in a non-GLBT environment, it's not at the gay community center, it's not in a gay bar. When or do I disclose that I'm gay? Or is it, I don't know if that's an issue for me, but Gwen, did
Gwen?
you want to respond?
Yes, I do want to respond to that. And what has worked for me now is when I meet new people, I don't care what they are. If it, my job, when I get a new job, when I meet new friends, one of the first things I tell them is I am a lesbian, and if you have an issue with that, we need to stop right now. So for me, I get it out up front because I don't want to go. I've been through way too much heartache in my life with people like, after they found out that I'm gay, they turn away from me or whatever. And I've been just through too much shit. And for me, upfront and direct is the way that works for me. I'm not saying everybody can do that, or maybe they can. I don't know. But I don't have the energy anymore to invest in a situation that is only later going to lead to heartache. So for me, I try to get that out there up front because, I don't, when I came out in 1990, I came out and I said I wasn't going back in the closet for nobody. And that's the way I have lived since then. I don't have to make statements. I don't have to, do bravado shit or anything like that. But I lived my life according to society's standards for so many years that when I came out in 1990, I said I would never do it again. And so I live openly as me, and part of me is a gay person or a lesbian, whatever term you want to put on it. Okay. So like I said, when I go to job interviews or when I meet new people or whatever, if I see that there may be potential for us to be friends or whatever, I tell them right up front, because I don't want to later on invest all that time and effort and energy into something just so it'll flip over backwards on me later. So that's what's worked for me.
I think that's great. You're so confident in identifying who you are right out the bat. I wish, maybe I take it for granted because I live in a more respectful place than a bluer place in the world, but I feel like maybe I should start to do that. Something I'm going to ask the group: do you think people know? I mean, even if they don't know what the term queer baiting is, like I said, I didn't know what it was till a month and a half ago. But do you think people know when they are queer baiting?
When they're doing it to someone else?
Yeah, regardless if they know what the term is, like when they know when they're kind of dangling someone along, and that person might ask them out, that person might hit on them, that person might kiss them, whatever, and then they pull the rug out from under them and we're like, oh no, I'm identified this way.
I would say yes. I think it's a type of manipulation of the
Yeah,
other person.
that's perfectly said. Yeah, it is manipulation, perfectly said. Anyone else?
What I believe is that people are conscious of their behavior and their actions. Okay. After a certain age, I'm going to say after 21. All right. And then they make choices as to how they want to conduct themselves. Okay. So yes, I'm going to say my answer to that would be yes. I do believe that they know what they're doing. Some people just want to hold on and hold on and hold on, and it's not ever going to go any further.
Yeah. And Christy said it well, they might be kind of the Q questioning of their own identity, and they're using someone who's confident in their identity to explore. But like we just said, that's not consensual to experiment or use someone else to do that.
But I also have to say, I think there are situations where somebody's just unaware, like they in their mind, they're building a friendship and they're just a naturally flirty kind of person with everybody. And they're not really aware that you are developing feelings that are beyond friendship. I do think there are some people out there that are so genuine and so outgoing that they seem flirty to everybody, and what could seem flirty and attentive and a come on to somebody could actually just be that person's person. Jamie, as he's going like, come on, all right. But you see what I'm getting at? Because some people are naturally effusive and flirty and outgoing like that. So you're spending time with them and they think they're building a friendship, and they don't realize that you're actually developing feelings and think there's more than a friendship.
I would totally agree with that. There are people that come off, I can be one of those people, come off very touchy-feely, very flirty. I would say for my specific situation I dealt with earlier this year, that person did use that as their excuse. Having said that, though, I've never seen them behave that way with anyone else. And I can understand if you live in certain parts of the world where people aren't as respected or valued, and the queer community is not like very present in their life. But in New York City, I mean, it's a place where, for the most part, queer people are very respected. It's a safer environment than most. So I was just very shocked, I guess. I feel like this person was manipulating me more than they were just unaware of their behavior. I'm making an assumption, but
Right.
yeah,
Well, I mean, we can only go on our own personal experiences. And in your case, you and I've talked about that situation. So I get where you're coming from. Jamie, what did you want to say, honey?
I just wanted to back up the idea that some folk are quite flirty. Me myself, I'm neurodivergent, and it's something that I've realised about myself is that I can be overly flirty, and having been raised as female as well, I've been raised to be very friendly, very hi, hugs, ooh, love hearts after everything, and I'm having to learn that now that I've got a beard, that's read differently. And it's something that I'm having to really work on, is reining that back in without feeling like I'm being rude, like I'm just being I don't want to go too much the other way and become monosyllabic bloke mode either. And it's something I'm finding difficult to navigate, with the addition of the fact that I'm neurodivergent, so I can sometimes be a bit hypersexual anyway, and it's not actually sexual. It's just a mode that I'm in. So I just wanted to back
Thank
up
you
that.
for sharing that. Yeah, that's such a valuable aspect of it.
Mhm.
Robert, you had your hand up, hon?
Yeah, I'm this is really a new term for me, and I'm wondering, does it happen in children in school? Like when I was in elementary school, other kids said to me that, I was gay, and at that age, nobody knew what that was, and I didn't have any sexual orientation at that time. It was more used to bully me, but they didn't stop and wait for an answer. They didn't say, "Are you gay?" They just said I was, to bully me. But I'm wondering, is queer baiting happening with children in elementary school and high school? I'm just not aware of that.
it might be. I certainly hope not, but it's very possible that it is. I think you're muted, Mom.
I think it's made, even in a hetero world, dating sucks. And there are instances of people, women stringing men along, men stringing women along to, for whatever reasons. Maybe it's financial, maybe it's stability, maybe it's, recognition because that person is famous, or whatever the case may be. There's people, both straight and gay, that string others along. But then when you add in the idea that it's somebody that knows, like in Elizabeth's case, they know that Liz is gay, right? They know that she's a lesbian. This person became very flirty and leaning into the relationship more than a friendship, knew 100% from the beginning who Elizabeth was and what she was expecting, and then pull the rug out from under her at the end. I think maybe it's, I don't want to say worse, because nobody's emotions are worse than anybody else's. People get hurt, but I think it's a double shock when it happens within the gay community like that, because it's no, you don't want to be with me, and no, you don't want to be with me because you're gay and I'm not, after they've let you believe that they have those sorts of feelings for you. I don't know, maybe I'm off base here, but I think it's,
I mean, I mean, I don't think for this. I mean, I think because it's still not accepted everywhere, where we're still on that um journey of making sure people are respected and not scared to live their life confidently. Um, and I wish that people didn't use people to kind of do that, and wish people queer bait, and wish that they felt confident, which at least for this specific case, this person lives in a safe environment, is around many different types of people, including queer people, and they've known from day one I'm queer. I mean, they've listened to my poetry, they know it's never been a secret. But it, I guess for some people it still can be scary to be honest, not necessarily honest with everyone else, honest with yourself. Because you have to be honest with yourself. And once you're honest with yourself, it can still be scary to be honest with everyone else, but the person that's hardest to come out to is yourself.
Yeah, that part, absolutely. Honesty is, it's harder to be honest with yourself than it is anybody else in the world, I think. And Christy, that's an interesting point that you bring up. If you had been raised somewhere else, would you be a heterosexual woman? So that's an interesting point. There's always that discussion, debate, nurture versus nature, et cetera, et cetera. But I do think if the entire world were open, loving, and accepting, that maybe it would be locale wouldn't play a role in it. You know what I mean? People would just be who they are. But unfortunately, it does, and our upbringing does, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead,
yeah, a lot of it does have to do with your upbringing, absolutely.
Robert. I see you have your hand up again.
Yeah, my view about the most common type of manipulation or exploitation of a gay man is a younger man who's searching for a sugar daddy. So his the younger man's expectation is that they're going to exploit the older man for money. And a very typical way that presents itself is on an online hookup or dating site where you would get a message from a younger man from another country who would give you extreme compliments and be especially make a lot of compliments about your body. And if you pursued that as the older man, the younger man soon would be asking for money, a plane ticket to come to United States, and then for you to sponsor them to become a US citizen. So I think that's the most typical type of older gay man exploitation to be wary of. Not as much gay baiting.
Yeah, I mean, sugar mamas and daddies are people. If they are non-binary or non-gender conforming, are certainly a big thing. Like I myself I'm not anyone's sugar baby, and I don't want to be anyone's sugar mama. I'm too much of a feminist for that. But it can be harmful to people, 100%. I think there was a Netflix documentary recently that talked about that. The Twitter, not Twitter, the Tinder swindler. Is that what it's called? They kind of he was a sugar daddy situation and robbed a lot of women of their money and their dignity.
Yeah, like a gigolo.
Yeah, kind of.
And Wow, that train left the station without me because I cannot remember the thought that I just had.
It'll come back.
Yeah, right. Oh my goodness. Um, earlier I had mentioned gender versus, nature versus nurture. And, you know, I say it a lot. I quote Lacey Rupp a lot. There are homosexual behaviors in 1,500 species. There's only homophobia in one, and that's us. And, chromosomes don't make a person. Genes don't make a person, There's X, 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 Y, X, Y, X, Y, X, 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 Y, Z, X, Y, I swear to God, everybody should just light up a joint at one time around the entire world, and maybe we could find world peace for 5 minutes.
Can we make that man? Yes. Can we just? Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Well,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
I think everybody would be arguing then over who gets the last bag of Doritos. People would
I don't like them, so they can have mine.
And that sucks. I don't know that, because of that one little word, ego, that fucks up so much shit. Are they the tangy, cheesy kind? Yeah, we could have the tangy, cheesy kind. We could have anything you want.
Whatever your munchies are. I tend to like Chinese food when I'm under the influence.
Some of us are not able to light up a joint because we
okay, well, you can have a glass of, you can have a mimosa.
Whatever makes you mellow out. It doesn't have to be drugs or edibles or anything that would hurt you, of course. But whatever. Hey, if it's a cup of cranberry juice that helps you mellow out, have a cup of cranberry juice.
But you get my point. Like, we're too busy worrying about each other's differences to care about each other's similarities, if that makes sense. We're too busy picking out what's different about each other to realize that we all came here from the same place. We're all leaving in the same way, and every single one of us bleeds red. Does it matter who we sleep with in the end? No, not to anybody but us. In reality, does it matter? Hell no. Except to the person that I'm going to be holding my hand, that's going to be holding my hand when I die.
Yeah.
Absolutely, Christy. We are all connected. Robert, what do you have to say?
I want to respond for myself for the nature versus nurture issue. I was born in 1963, and both in my parents' house and in the school I went to, there was no discussion about biology. My parents didn't even give me a book about puberty. And I grew up in Canada where sex education was, we saw a movie by the National Film Board where one frog jumped on top of another. So that was sex education. And at the time, there was no GLBT people in the media. So for me, I think it has to be mostly nature. Because I didn't have any nurture. Nothing was exposed to me about GLBT back then. But now I see it's different because in the media for youth, there's a lot of GLBT content. So you could have a nurture effect now. but not for people who are like, 50s.
I think it's nature regardless of the generation. I don't care if it's today's generation, my 14-year-old granddaughter who, is having a lot of gender questioning and so on right now as she explores herself, or people of our age. Robert, you were born in 63, I was born in 66. It's all nature. The nurture comes into play. Nurture comes into play for the safety and security of allowing a child to be themselves and express their gender in the ways that they feel comfortable. In my opinion, it's all nature. Who we are is in our nature. The nurture only comes into effect in the acceptance of who we are and the allowance of us to be who we are. Elizabeth, for example, she comes from a home where very accepting of her sexuality, her gender, and who she is. But I wouldn't have changed who she is. It just made it easier to be who she is. Would you agree?
That is perfectly said. It made it easier. And I'm very fortunate for that, by the way. I know that I'm very fortunate that I grew up where I have been respected and valued equally. And I know that that is not the case for everyone. And I don't forget that, by the way. I know that there are people who are been kicked out of their homes or don't
Right.
get to see their family or have been harmed. I understand that. I'm just very fortunate, and has been an easier, and for my younger sibling too, who is queer, has been an easier journey for us.
But my point remains, I'm still who I am. Yes, for 10 years I was married and I chose to play society's roles, but it didn't change who I was on a core level because I didn't have that nurturing as a child, that acceptance and that allowance. I just feel like that nurture part of that discussion just makes it easier for the nature to express itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it absolutely does.
Anybody else got anything they want to chime in? Elizabeth?
Just looking at my notes here. I guess something that came up, very recently this week is the Florida bill of Don't Say Gay. I'm sure many of you are aware of that, and that they won't allow talking about LGBTQ in classrooms, which people should be educating, especially in public schools, what that is, so that people are aware, of who they are, but and that who we are and we exist. But it's very sad to know that that bill was passed. It wasn't shocking given Florida is a very conservative state. But how do we flip that? How do we make it so that that is in the textbooks, it is a part of education, that people learn, and that people, if they hear the word gay, that they might think that, oh, maybe I identify as that, and should safely feel able to go on that identity journey, if they choose to.
Yeah, that's just because it's not allowed to talk about it. I mean, doesn't mean it's going to go away.
Yeah.
I think it's not
That's
only
really sad. I'm just now hearing about that. That's the first I've heard about that, but that's
Oh,
very
really?
sad.
It's been in the news all week. Yeah. Ron DeSantis did unfortunately get that bill passed this week in Florida.
it's not only talking, but like if 10% of United States population is GLBT, and if if there's in the textbooks, if in the textbook they show an opposite sex couple, then 10% of the time in the textbook, they should show a same-sex couple. So it's not only what the kid hears or says, but it's what they see also in the textbook, which shows what America is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will. So and they tell kids that they'll go to hell. Well, I'm a Jew, so I don't believe in hell. So you can tell me whatever you want. I know I'm not going to hell for being who I am, but that's just me who can kind of laugh at that and move on. I know for other people who might believe in that, it might be more triggering or traumatizing for them.
When you were saying about the Southern Baptist Church.
Yeah, I was raised Southern Baptist, and you know the 10 Commandments? Well, they didn't even compare to the worst sin, and that was being gay. And you would be told, like Christy said, that you're going to go to hell if you're gay. So because of who I am as a person, I had to go to counseling to assure myself that I wouldn't go to hell. I was scared. I was so scared that I was going to go to hell because I liked women. And it is very crippling. It does make you shut that down. That's why, I followed society's rules for as many years as I did. I was 30 when I came out. And even then, I still, but I'm so glad she brought that up, because that is a very valid point and situation. And it doesn't matter when you are raised with a specific belief, okay, and you have to erase that belief or find ways to invalidate it or make it not so, it's emotionally crippling. And for me, I don't know if I ever fully overcome it. You know what I'm saying? And I'm talking about my emotional, okay? I'm not talking about the other stuff. But yeah, that's what I was saying, is that Southern Baptist and Church of Christ is two of the worst churches to have been raised in. And, my aunt was a Methodist, and she told me that they didn't believe that way. And that's when I started questioning religion. It's like, well, why don't you, and why do they, and blah, blah, blah. Well, I don't have religion today. I have spirituality. And so that suits me just fine. Anyway, I'm 61 years old this year, and there's been many times that stuff like that has come back to haunt you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, beautifully said, that it's important that spirituality is a part of your life. I guess it's like when people say, we don't believe in that. Well, you don't believe in those people, which is awful. It's like, we're standing right in front of you. Why? Because we can't, I guess it's because you can't make a baby, right? We can't conceive. That's the big thing, obviously. But, people are people, and there are plenty of heterosexual couples that will choose to never conceive. That's their choice. I think that's what people forget. It's like, just because you're heterosexual doesn't mean you're going to go get married. Well, not everyone believes in marriage. Not everyone believes in partnerships. Not everyone wants children or can have children or choose to want to start a family. So it just, I guess it's naive, but it still doesn't make sense to me how people can't see what I just said.
Absolutely. And religion will not just punish who they think are sinners. Let me rephrase that. The church, because the church and religion are two different things.
Yes.
When I was with my ex, Denise, and we raised our children together, her children, through their father, were very involved in the local church, went to church camp and all of these things. we sent Kayla to church camp one summer. And midway through the week, we got a phone call that we had to go get her because they found out that her mother was gay and was with a woman. And they locked my stepdaughter, my daughter, in a room watching anti-gay movies for hours and preached at her and told her that her mother was going to hell and that she was going to go to hell if she supported her mother in this behavior and all of these things. So, you know, that was really horrible for her because she was at a very tender, like 12 and a half, almost 13 years old. And she came home and for months was terrified that her mother was going to go to hell because her mother was with me, you know? And when you really look at it, I mean, for Christ's sakes, the word homosexuality wasn't added to the Bible till the 20th century. You know, those things happened all of the time. King David had, you know, a male acquaintance, male friend who was very rumored to be his male lover as well. You know, it has happened throughout time. There was a time when it was celebrated. Nobody, you know, people didn't care, you know. And then somebody's puritanical disbelief, disgust, whatever. Robert, do you have your hand up? You wanted to add something, hon?
Yeah, the Florida law reminds me of you know, what happened in Texas about 6 months ago, where about 20 Democratic elected officials left Texas so they wouldn't have enough people to have a quorum to make a vote. And my view is that there's so much division in the United States that we're not united. And I had sent my senator and my congressperson comments to initiate discussions about whether United States should break up into two countries. Because I'm just fed up with people who don't. I see there's some people who believe in civil rights. There's other people who don't. There's some people who believe in separation of church and state. Some people believe in the separation of the three branches of the federal government. Other people don't. And I would rather that this country separate into two countries as opposed to just all the time in Congress, everything being a blockade. But those discussions really haven't happened. But when I hear what's happening in Florida, I still wish that we were talking about that in the United States. That's it.
Or we can list a straw to people and just put them underground for those who don't respect people.
I see the direction that the chat is going in, and unfortunately, Robert, you're right. There is a lot of division in this country, and so much of that division is driven by religion. Is driven by my religion's better than your religion. You can't practice your religion in my country because we're a religious country and we're based on this and oh my God, you know, I feel like so much of it, you know, the division in this country, racial, emotional, sexual, and you know, against the community itself, is driven by religion, religious aspects. You know, whether it's division over types of religion, or what you believe out of your religion. I just it's fucked up if you ask me. Yes, I agree, Jamie. A lot of churchgoers do believe that. For many, many years, if you were found to be, if people thought you were gay, parents had their children committed in mental institutions, or had priests try exorcisms. There's been all kinds of ways that religion has tried to pray the gay away, for lack of a better term. Beat the gay out of us.
I mean,
Conversion camps.
Yeah, conversion camps still sadly exist, especially in many of the states in this country.
Yeah. It's horrific when religion should be a factor, a thing that brings us together. And in a lot of communities, it is small communities, church going people, like the people, the congregants, come together and are great. But when you get into the politics of religion, maybe that's the term I should use. The politics of religion is what drives the division in this country.
Yeah, that's actually a really easy way of saying it. Because I'm very spiritual and very religious, and I'm lucky that I go to a synagogue that respects who I am and values people, and I wish it was that way for everyone, and people didn't have to second guess themselves for wanting to go to church or go to temple or whatever form of religion they may want to practice or believe in.
Right. Well, I think we're coming up here on 9 o'clock, pretty close. Religion was used to control and hold power, and things were left down.
Yep.
Absolutely, Christy. Absolutely. Yes, there was a lot of things left out of the different versions of the Bibles. And I believe religion is used in a lot of ways as a method of control.
It is, absolutely.
But on a brighter note, we have conversations like this, and spaces like this where we can bring these things to the table and bring these things to the light and take their power by speaking it away. So I'd like to thank you all for coming and joining us and participating in this important discussion. We'll be back here in 2 weeks with a new panel and a new discussion with my co-host Elizabeth. And we appreciate you all for coming. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you for hosting.